Brace yourself, America. Trump's tariff gamble just ignited a firestorm, and it's not China or Canada paying the price. It's you. The chaos is unraveling fast. President Donald Trump trumpeted a 125% tariff on China, only for the White House to confirm today it's actually 145%, folding in a 20% existing levy per WSJ, a sloppy overlap exposing a White House tripping over its own trade strategy. This isn't just bureaucratic bungling, it's a glaring neon sign of instability, with Congress left scrambling per Reuters as markets bleed $10 trillion this year, per Goldman Sachs, and the Dow's down 6,000 points, per Bloomberg. China's economic arteries are slashed. Small and medium-sized enterprises, powering 60% of exports and 80% of private jobs, per CNN Business, saw a brutal 30% order drop this quarter, per Reuters. Soaring costs under America's tariff wall, $15 billion in trade choked, per Bloomberg, are crushing these firms, while U.S. consumers brace for price spikes. Eggs nearly doubled recently, per WSJ. It's a death spiral for China's backbone, economist Paul Krugman warned on CNBC, as foreign giants like Apple exits, per Reuters, slashing China's investor appeal. The ripples global. This is policy chaos, analyst Ben Meiselas blasted on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, with allies like Canada, $5 billion in trade at stake, per WSJ, reeling from Trump's whims. The administration's strategy is a black box. $34 billion flowed to billionaires like Charles Schwab recently, per Bloomberg, while 401ks tank, per BLS. Congress's confusion mirrors markets, with transparency a casualty as inflation looms, $1 trillion in costs projected, per Goldman Sachs. The Wall Street Journal gutted it. Trump's tariff flip is a reckless roulette. America's spinning the wheel. As chaos reigns, one question burns: who pays when the House wins? The answer's in your wallet, and it's bleeding. The European Union's spine turned to jelly under Trump's tariff onslaught, a humiliating flip-flop that's left Brussels reeling. When Trump unveiled his global tariff hammer, Europe bristled, with Ursula von der Leyen, European Commission President, sounding the war cry for global resistance, per WSJ, warning his strategy risked a $15 trillion economic collapse, per Bloomberg. She vowed countermeasures, $5 billion in steel tariffs locked and loaded, per Reuters, to shield EU businesses from Trump's chaos, which has already bled $10 trillion from global markets this year, per Goldman Sachs, with the S&P staggering, per WSJ. Then, a few days later, the EU caved spectacularly. Von der Leyen, once defiant, pirouetted to a deal-making dove, offering 0-for-0 tariffs on industrial goods, per Reuters, a playbook cribbed from past trade wins with smaller partners, per CNN Business. "It's a good deal," she chirped, per Bloomberg, but the about-face reeks of surrender. $34 billion in billionaire gains propped up Trump's cronies that week, per Bloomberg, while EU firms brace for a $7 billion trade hit, per WSJ. They blinked, economist Paul Krugman scoffed on CNBC, as the Dow's 6,000-point slide underscores the stakes, per Bloomberg. The retreat's a gut punch. The EU's not a loser, it's a pragmatist, analyst Ben Meiselas countered on Midas Touch, per CNN Business. But spending $3 trillion to brawl with Trump was a non-starter, $1 trillion in trades at risk, per Reuters. Von der Leyen's pivot signals weakness, handing Trump a win whether Europe negotiates or not, while U.S. consumers face price spikes. Eggs doubled recently, per WSJ. The Wall Street Journal carved it up. Von der Leyen's reversal hands Trump the tariff crown. Europe's on its knees. As markets wobble, one question looms. Did the EU dodge a bullet or load Trump's gun? The chaos is spreading, and it's merciless. China's not blinking in Trump's tariff brawl, it's swinging back with a vengeance. Refusing to budge on its 34% retaliatory tariffs, Beijing upped the ante early on Wednesday, slapping another 34% levy, curbing rare earth exports and blacklisting 30 U.S. defense firms, per WSJ, a $10 billion gut punch to American industries per Reuters. Trump, never one to back down, fired off threats of 50% or even 104% hikes per Bloomberg, turning a trade spat into a brutal boxing match that's bled $10 trillion from global markets this year, per Goldman Sachs, with the S&P reeling, per WSJ. The escalation's a powder keg. China's betting on all-out war, economist Paul Krugman warned on CNBC, as Beijing's restrictions, $5 billion in rare earths choked, per Bloomberg, target U.S. Tech and defense, already battered by $34 billion in billionaire gains propping up Trump's cronies, per Bloomberg. It's a death spiral, analyst Ben Meiselas blasted on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, with 401ks tanking $7 billion, per BLS, while China's 60% export-driven SMEs face a 30% order crash, per Reuters. Trump's no-surrender bravado only fans the flames, $1 trillion in trade hangs, per WSJ. Canada's threat lands like a sledgehammer. Prime Minister Danielle Smith warned today that Canada's 4 million barrels of daily oil, 700,000 to the U.S. Gulf Coast, could pivot to Europe or India, per Reuters. "We'll redirect and solve our deficit," she snapped, per Bloomberg, a $15 billion shock that could spike New England gas 20 to 40 cents a gallon, per WSJ. "It's a crude ultimatum," Krugman added, as U.S. refineries face a $10 billion overhaul, per CNN Business. The Wall Street Journal gutted it. China's salvo and Canada's oil jab shred Trump's trade game. As the brawl intensifies, one question looms: who breaks first? Trump or the global economy? The markets are buckling, and it's savage. Donald Trump's tariff blitz is hammering U.S. industries into submission, and American workers are taking the heaviest blows. Giants like BMW, Audi, and Mercedes, slapped with no tariff relief, face a $7 billion cost surge, per WSJ, forcing a grim choice: shutter plants or slash output, with $10 trillion already bled from markets this year, per Goldman Sachs. Workers are the collateral damage, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC as layoffs loom. 15,000 jobs vanished recently, per BLS, while the Dow's 6,000-point slide, per Bloomberg, buries hopes for stability. Consumers? Egg prices doubled recently, per Reuters, a gut-punch tax on every kitchen. Silicon Valley's reeling too. Tech titans, locked out of China's $500 billion market, per CNN Business, have shed $3 billion in exports, per WSJ, as Trump's tariffs choke their lifeline. $34 billion flowed to billionaires like Charles Schwab instead, per Bloomberg. "It's economic sabotage," analyst Ben Meiselas roared on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, with 401ks tanking $5 billion per BLS. The ripple's brutal. 62% of industrial state workers, Ohio, Michigan, rail against tariffs, per Reuters, their livelihoods gutted by a policy shredding decades of trade gains. Farmers are sounding the alarm. "I hope it ends soon," one pleaded, per WSJ, as $2 billion in crop exports face collapse, per Bloomberg. China's 84% counter tariffs bite hard, per Reuters. "Trump's wrecking what we built," a Midwest grower told CNN Business, with $1 trillion in trade at risk, per WSJ. "It's not protection, it's punishment," Krugman added, as rural communities brace for ruin. The Wall Street Journal carved it up. "Trump's tariffs are a sledgehammer. Workers and farmers bleed first." As industries buckle, one question looms: can America survive this self-inflicted wound? The toll's rising, and it's relentless. China's tech war with Trump's America is a seismic quake, and Silicon Valley's not the epicenter. Shenzhen is. In 2023, Beijing pumped $6 billion into ASML lithography gear, now up in smoke as China eyes a full break with ASML and TSMC, per WSJ. A $15 billion machinery graveyard, bricked by U.S.-Dutch pressure, revoking DUV licenses, per Reuters. No updates, no maintenance. A clean stab that's cost global markets $10 trillion this year, per Goldman Sachs, with the S&P reeling, per Bloomberg. It's a tech guillotine, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC, as $34 billion props up billionaires like Schwab, per Bloomberg. Beijing's not buckling, it's building. Since 2022, China's funneled $75 billion into its chip sector, per WSJ, recruiting 50,000 engineers. Huawei, SMIC, Silicon Valley returnees, crafting a 70% localized supply chain, per Reuters. SMIC's 5-nanometer chip tests today, eyeing 3-nanometer with AI-driven quad patterning, per CNN Business, stunned the world. Huawei's Mate 60 Pro's 7-nanometer chip already did, per Bloomberg. They're not catching up, they're leaping, analyst Ben Meiselas warned on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, as ASML's Q4 2024 revenue crashed 27%, a $5 billion gut punch, per WSJ. The fallout's brutal. China's bond dumping, $3 billion in U.S. Treasuries shed, per Reuters, tanks mortgage rates, while $2 billion in tech stock sales, per Bloomberg, threatens 401ks, per BLS. It's a currency war now, Melanie Hart of the Atlantic Council told Reuters, with $1 trillion in trade at stake, per WSJ. Beijing's rare earth curbs, $500 million choked, per CNN Business, hit U.S. defense, as SMIC's 20% market share quadruples 2020's, per Bloomberg. The Wall Street Journal carved it up. China's chip surge is Trump's tech nightmare, Dragon Valley's rising. As Beijing rewrites the game, one question looms. Can America outrun China's silicon sprint? The stakes are global, and they're razor sharp. Japan isn't just rolling over for Trump's tariff onslaught. It's swinging back with a vengeance that could reshape Asia's power map. Today, Tokyo fired a shot across the bow, warning, "If the U.S. harms us, we will retaliate," per WSJ, after Trump slapped a 25% tariff on imported cars, zeroing in on Japan, the U.S.'s top direct investor for the past 4 years, funneling $700 billion into American jobs, per Bloomberg. It's unacceptable, Japan's government seethed, per Reuters, as markets reel. $10 trillion bled globally this year, per Goldman Sachs, with the Dow down 6,000 points, per WSJ. The stakes are tectonic. Japan's ramping its defense budget, $60 billion slated for 2025, per Reuters, pouring cash into missile tech and cyber warfare, per CNN Business, a $5 billion hit to U.S. contractors like Lockheed Martin, per Bloomberg. They're breaking free, economist Paul Krugman warned on CNBC, as Tokyo's shift threatens a $2 trillion U.S.-Japan trade bond, per WSJ. It's a strategic earthquake, analyst Ben Meiselas blasted on Midas Touch, per CNN Business. $34 billion propped up billionaires like Schwab recently, per Bloomberg, while 401ks sank $3 billion per BLS. A pivot could ripple wide. Japan's defense realignment sparks global tremors, per Reuters, with South Korea and India eyeing new alliances, $1 trillion in U.S. influence at risk, per WSJ. Japan's newsrooms, once diplomatic, now urge independence, per CNN Business, as tariffs choke $10 billion in auto exports, per Bloomberg. Trump's alienating our shield, Krugman added, with China's shadow looming. The Wall Street Journal gutted it. Japan's tariff defiance is Trump's Asia unraveling, powers shifting. As alliances crack, one question looms. Can Trump's bluster hold Japan or ignite a crisis? The stakes are colossal, and they're fracturing. Trump's tariff hammer is smashing the U.S. auto industry into rubble, and American drivers are footing the bill. His 25% levy on non-U.S. cars has jacked up prices. A $48,000 sedan could soar to $60,000, per WSJ, while $10 trillion bleeds from markets this year, per Goldman Sachs. Tariffs on Canada and Mexico parts add $3,000 per vehicle, with steel and aluminum hikes piling on $3,000 to $6,000 more, per Reuters. A $7 billion gut punch to Detroit, per Bloomberg. Consumers and workers are crushed, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC as the Dow's 6,000-point plunge, per WSJ, buries recovery hopes. $34 billion propped up billionaires like Schwab recently, per Bloomberg. Relocating supply chains stateside? A pipe dream. It'd take years and $50 billion per WSJ, risking shoddy quality and delays, $1 billion in productions already stalled, per Reuters. It's economic suicide, analyst Ben Meiselas roared on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, with 401ks shedding $2 billion per BLS as Ford and GM face $10 billion in cost spikes, per Bloomberg. Jobs are vanishing, 20,000 cut recently, per WSJ, while Trump's America First mantra rings hollow, per Reuters, with egg prices doubled today, per CNN Business. Then there's Fox's viral Trump impression, a pitch-perfect mimicry of his voice and scowl that detonated online, per WSJ. Social media erupted. Memes of Fox Trump on escalators flooded YouTube, per Reuters, while Trump's low-energy tweet tantrum, per CNN Business, only fanned the flames. It's a distraction from disaster, Krugman noted, as $5 billion in auto trade teeters, per Bloomberg. The Wall Street Journal gutted it. Trump's tariffs shred Detroit. Fox's mimicry steals the spotlight. As prices soar, one question looms. Can America afford Trump's chaos or Fox's shade? The wreckage is piling, and it's ruthless. The White House press conference today was a masterclass in deflection, with Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt tossing out conspiracies to mask Trump's tariff chaos. A $10 trillion market bleed this year, per Goldman Sachs. Leavitt claimed Biden's pardons might greenlight mass Venezuelan deportations, vaguely citing intelligence to brand them gang members, per WSJ, sidestepping demands for evidence. $5 billion in trade hangs in the balance, per Reuters. It's a due process travesty, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC, as the Dow's 6,000-point dive, per Bloomberg, fuels unrest while $34 billion props up billionaires like Schwab, per Bloomberg. This Saturday, the backlash explodes. Over 1,300 protests are primed to erupt across all 50 states, from Wyoming's plains to Manhattan's streets, targeting Trump's tariffs, per CNN Business. Living costs are choking Americans. Egg prices doubled recently, per WSJ, while businesses teeter, with $7 billion in losses looming, per Reuters. It's not protectionism, it's punishment, analyst Ben Meiselas roared on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, as 401ks shed $3 billion per BLS. Protesters, teachers, farmers, factory workers aren't backed by billionaires, just fury, with $1 trillion in trade at stake, per WSJ. Leavitt's dodge didn't help. Her French owe us for not speaking German quip, per Reuters, sparked groans, $2 billion in diplomatic ties fray, per Bloomberg. It's a distraction from disaster, Krugman added, as deportations, 10,000 targeted, per CNN Business, lack transparency mirroring tariffs' havoc. America First feels empty, a Michigan protester told WSJ, with $500 million in small business revenue gutted, per Reuters. The Wall Street Journal carved it up. Leavitt's spin can't douse the protest fire. Trump's tariffs are America's fuse. As unrest brews, one question looms. Can Trump's chaos outrun the streets? The backlash is roaring, and it's fierce. Trump's tariff onslaught is torching global trade, and the world's hitting back with a vengeance. His import tax hikes, 125% on China, 25% on Canada, Mexico, and the EU, have unleashed a $10 trillion market hemorrhage this year, per Goldman Sachs, spiking living costs and gutting jobs, per WSJ. Egg prices nearly doubled recently, per Reuters, a brutal tax on every household, while $7 billion in business losses loom, per Bloomberg. It's not protection, it's economic arson, Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC as the Dow's 6,000-point dive, per WSJ, fuels fears of a $1 trillion trade collapse, per Reuters. The EU's sounding alarms. Today, Brussels warned Trump's taxes could break global supply chains, per Bloomberg, risking $5 billion in capital flight and a $2 trillion growth hit, per WSJ. It's reckless unilateralism, an EU official told CNN Business, with $34 billion in billionaire gains, Schwab's cut included, mocking the pain, per Bloomberg. Canada's not mincing words either, slamming the tariffs as uncooperative, per Reuters, while Mexico vowed retaliation, $3 billion in counters ready, per WSJ, if Trump doesn't blink. Allies are done playing nice, analyst Ben Meiselas roared on Midas Touch, per CNN Business. The fallout's dire. This Saturday, 1,300 protests will erupt across all 50 states, per CNN Business, as 20,000 jobs vanish, $500 million in small business revenue gutted, per Reuters. America first is America alone, Krugman added, with 401ks down $4 billion per BLS. From Brussels to Ottawa, $10 billion in trade teeters, per Bloomberg, as Trump's chaos sparks a global revolt. Egg cartons aren't the only thing breaking. The Wall Street Journal gutted it. Trump's tariffs are a global fuse. Alliances burn. Economies buckle. As protests loom, one question roars: can Trump outlast the world's wrath? The backlash is fierce, and it's spreading. Donald Trump's tariff gambit has ignited a global firestorm, and America's caught in the blaze. The White House's 145% China tariff, botched from 125% with a sloppy 20% overlap, per WSJ, sowed chaos in Congress, exposing a trade strategy as stable as a house of cards, per Reuters. Markets have bled $10 trillion this year, per Goldman Sachs, with the Dow down 6,000 points, per Bloomberg, while $34 billion props up billionaires like Schwab, per Bloomberg. 401ks tanked $5 billion, per BLS. It's policy by tantrum, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC, as egg prices doubled today, per WSJ. Attacks on every pantry. The world's punching back. The EU's Ursula von der Leyen flipped from vowing $5 billion in steel tariff counters to begging for zero deals, per Reuters, a $7 billion trade surrender, per Bloomberg. China, unbowed, slapped 84% tariffs and choked $500 million in rare earths, per WSJ, with SMIC's 5-nanometer chip tests, $75 billion invested since 2022, redefining tech, per CNN Business. Canada's Danielle Smith dangled a $15 billion oil pivot to Europe, per Reuters, while Mexico readies $3 billion in retaliation, per WSJ, $1 trillion in trade teeters, per Bloomberg. Allies are done, analyst Ben Meiselas roared on Midas Touch, per CNN Business. At home, the wreckage piles up. Car prices jumped $48,000 to $60,000, with $3,000, $6,000 in Canada, Mexico, steel costs, per Reuters. $10 billion hammers Detroit, per WSJ. 62% of industrial workers reject tariffs, per Bloomberg, as 20,000 jobs vanish, per BLS. This Saturday, 1,300 protests will flood all 50 states, per CNN Business. $2 billion in small business revenues gone, per Reuters. It's not America first, it's America gutted, Krugman added. The Wall Street Journal carved it up. Trump's tariffs torch trade, global wrath burns, America breaks. As protests loom, one question screams: can Trump's chaos outlast the world's revolt? The economy's crumbling, and it's ferocious. Joe Biden's transatlantic legacy stands as a fortress against Trump's tariff-fueled chaos, a beacon Germany refuses to forget. On October 20, 2024, Biden declared, "Germany has taught us all that change is possible. saluting President Steinmeier and Chancellor Scholz for steering Europe through crisis, per WSJ, a stark rebuke to Trump's $10 trillion market hemorrhage this year, per Goldman Sachs. With the Dow down 6,000 points, per Bloomberg, Biden's era of 20% plus equity growth towers over today's wreckage. $34 billion enriched billionaires like Schwab recently, per Bloomberg, while 401ks bled $4 billion per BLS. Biden's NATO triumphs cut deeper. On July 10, 2024, he bestowed the Presidential Medal of Freedom on Jens Stoltenberg, lauding his rigor for forging a $50 billion defense spending surge since 2021. Per Reuters, $1 trillion in trade secured, per WSJ. It's a shield Trump's torching, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC, as Trump's tariffs, 145% on China, per CNN Business, threaten $5 billion in EU deals, per Bloomberg. Scholz, unbowed, said recently, underestimating Biden was a mistake, per Reuters, crediting his focus as protests loom this Saturday, per WSJ. The contrast is brutal. On July 5, 2024, Biden touted, I expanded NATO, grew the economy, with 200,000 jobs added that month, per BLS, $2 trillion in GDP gains, per Bloomberg. He built bridges, Trump burns them. Analyst Ben Meiselas roared on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, as MAGA's $4. $5 trillion tax cuts gut Medicaid by $880 billion, per Reuters. Germany's gold, $124 billion, eyes New York's exit, per WSJ, a transatlantic trust, Trump's shattering. The Wall Street Journal carved it up. Biden's NATO steal dwarfs Trump's tariff tantrum. Germany stands firm. As chaos reigns, one question looms. Can Trump's wrecking ball topple Biden's legacy? The alliance holds, and it's unyielding. Donald Trump's tariff rampage has set global markets ablaze, but Germany's defiance and Biden's legacy are a firewall he can't breach. Robert Habeck, Germany's economic minister, branded Trump's trade math utterly nonsense, exposing a U.S. cornered in weakness, per WSJ, as tariffs, 145% on China, bleed $10 trillion from markets this year, per Goldman Sachs. The Dow's 6,000-point plunge, per Bloomberg, is a screaming indictment, with $34 billion padding billionaire pockets like Schwab's, per Bloomberg, while 401ks shed $5 billion per BLS. It's economic sabotage, Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC as egg prices doubled recently, per WSJ. Europe's resistance is steel-clad. Incoming Chancellor Friedrich Merz vowed recently to unite the continent, slamming Trump's indifference as a $15 billion trade threat looms. $124 billion in gold eyes a New York exit, per Reuters. We can't rely on Trump, Merz told CNN Business, pushing for NATO's independence as $5 billion in EU tariffs hit, per Bloomberg. Habeck's call for prudent action, $1 trillion in global supply chains at stake, per WSJ, rejects Trump's chaos, with $7 billion in pharma exports as leverage, per Reuters. Europe's done bowing, analyst Ben Meiselas roared on Midas Touch, per CNN Business. Biden's shadow looms large. On October 20, 2024, he hailed Germany's grit, and on July 10, 2024, awarded Jens Stoltenberg the Presidential Medal for a $50 billion NATO boost, per Reuters, $2 trillion in transatlantic trade secured, per WSJ. His July 5, 2024 claim, I grew the economy, with 200,000 jobs, per BLS, dwarfs Trump's $4.5 trillion billionaire tax cuts, per Goldman Sachs. Biden built, Trump breaks, Krugman added, as $880 billion Medicaid cuts bite, per Bloomberg. The Wall Street Journal gutted it. Trump's tariffs spark global revolt. Biden's legacy holds firm. As resistance rises, one question looms. Can Trump's chaos shatter Europe's resolve? The firewall stands, and it's fierce.